She thought she was just helping a dying stranger in the wilderness, never imagining he held the keys to every ranch in Wyoming and the power to change her life forever. The young widow felt the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders as she stepped off the creaky stagecoach into the small, dusty town in Wyoming she had chosen for a fresh start, her heart a mixture of grief and determination after losing her husband in a tragic accident. She carried within her the fragile life of her unborn child, a constant reminder of both loss and hope. She had left behind the familiar streets of her hometown, the echoes of laughter and the warmth of family now, replaced by the unknown roads and barren landscapes that stretched endlessly before her. Each step she took was deliberate as she tried to quiet the storm of emotions raging inside her. She rented a modest cabin at the edge of town, the wooden walls barely shielding her from the chill of the fair Wyoming winds, but it was a place where she could breathe and gather her strength. She spent her days tending a small garden outside her home, planting vegetables and herbs. She imagined cooking nourishing meals for herself and her child. She wandered through the sparse streets, getting to know the faces of the townspeople, some nodding politely, others barely glancing her way. The isolation was heavy, but it also offered her a strange kind of solace, a chance to heal away from the whispers of her past. One afternoon, as she collected water from the nearby stream, she noticed a figure lying motionless beneath the shade of a twisted pine tree. Curiosity and concern drew her closer, and as she approached, she realized it was a man, his clothes torn and caked with mud and blood, his breathing shallow and uneven. She froze for a moment, the fear of the unknown gripping her, yet she knew she could not walk away. She carefully helped him to her cabin, using every ounce of strength she had to lift him and carry him across the rough terrain. The man's eyes fluttered open briefly, and he tried to speak, but no words came out. The sight of his vulnerability stirred something protective in her. She laid him gently on the worn bed and tended his wounds, cleaning the cuts and bruises as best as she could, using cloths and water she had prepared for herself in case of emergencies. Each movement felt purposeful, a way to anchor herself in the midst of the chaos that had become her life. She stayed by his side through the night, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on her chest. And when he drifted into a restless sleep, she whispered words of encouragement, reminding herself that helping him was not only a way to save his life, but also a way to reclaim a sense of purpose in her own. She prepared simple meals from the small pantry she had stocked, the scent of boiled vegetables and fresh bread filling the cabin. And as the Dio man slowly regained consciousness over the next few days, she found herself talking to him, softly sharing stories of her past, her hopes and fears. He listened quietly, sometimes offering a weak smile or a nod, and though she had no idea who he truly was, the bond between them began to grow each day, bringing a glimmer of warmth into the cold and lonely space she had carved out for herself in this remote corner of Wyoming. The wilderness outside continued to be harsh and unforgiving, the winds howling through the trees and the distant mountains standing like silent sentinels. She felt both small and resilient at the same time. She understood that her journey had only just begun, that the decisions she made now would shape the life of her child and the future that awaited her. Yet in helping this dying stranger, she discovered a strength within herself she had not known existed, a determination to survive, to nurture, and to face the unknown with courage. And even in her darkest moments, she allowed herself to imagine that perhaps fate had led her here for a reason, that through compassion and bravery she could forge a new life for herself and for the little one growing inside her, and that even in the wilderness of Wyoming, she could find hope and perhaps something like happiness. If you want, I can continue and write part 2 in this same flowing style, so the story remains seamless. She woke before dawn, the soft gray light of Wyoming filtering through the thin curtains of her cabin. The man she had rescued stirred beside her, and she quickly checked his pulse. Relief washed over her when she found it steady, though weak. She moved, quietly preparing a simple breakfast of porridge and fresh water, while he sat up slowly, wincing at the pain that still laced his body. She offered a gentle smile, encouraging him to eat, and as he did, she studied him, carefully noticing the way his clothes, though tattered, seemed oddly fine beneath the dirt, and the way his hands bore a certain strength despite their current weakness. She asked him questions about who he was, where he had come from, and what had brought him to the wilderness, but his answers were vague, a shadow passing over his face whenever he spoke of the past. She respected his silence, knowing that some stories were too heavy to share immediately, and so she focused on small comforts: warmth of fire, the soft blankets she had washed and prepared, and the simple meals she could offer him each day. She learned to anticipate his needs, carrying water from the Dia stream even when her own body ached from the pregnancy and the lingering grief that clung to her like a second skin. She found herself talking more openly, now sharing her childhood memories of rolling fields and laughter with her parents, the brief years of joy she had experienced before tragedy struck, and slowly he began to open up in fragments. Stories of distant lands, of ranches and open skies, and the feeling of being untethered from ordinary life. She listened intently, her heart aching for the man whose presence was both mysterious and comforting. She began to feel a connection to him that went beyond gratitude or duty, a quiet understanding that they had both been touched by loss, and that in helping each other they might find a path forward. In those long days she noticed moments of contradiction, glimpses of wealth and authority that seemed out of place in a man living in near wilderness. He spoke casually of horses and cattle as if they were mere possessions of little consequence, yet the way he observed the land suggested deep knowledge and experience. She dismissed it at first, attributing it to pride or habit. But a small seed of curiosity had been planted in her mind, and with each passing day she could not help but wonder what secrets he carried within him. At night she would sit by the fire watching him sleep, sometimes imagining the life he had left behind, the people he had known, and the power he must hold somewhere beyond the mountains and forests that surrounded them. And though she had no answers, yet she felt a cautious hope that this encounter was more than chance, that perhaps their meeting was a turning point for both of them. As she rubbed her growing belly, feeling the life within her stirring, she realized that caring for this stranger had given her purpose, a reason to step beyond grief, to nurture and protect. And in those quiet moments, she promised herself that no matter what truths might come to light, she would face them with courage. For herself and for the child she carried, the days turned into a rhythm of care and quiet companionship, each shared smile, each word exchanged, weaving a fragile bond neither of them could fully name, yet it existed in the spaces between. Gestures, in the shared labor of healing, and in the silent understanding that they were both survivors of storms too great to face alone. And as the sun set over the rugged Wyoming landscape, casting golden light across the cabin, she felt an unexpected peace, knowing that in this remote and unforgiving place they had found a measure of safety, and in each other a tentative beginning that might one day lead to something neither had dared to imagine. The weeks passed, and the bond between them deepened in quiet, unspoken ways. She learned to anticipate his needs before he asked, carrying water from the stream, chopping wood for the fire, and preparing meals that soothed both body and spirit. He moved more freely now, though a lingering weariness shadowed his every gesture, and in those moments she noticed the strength beneath the surface, the way his hands handled tools with ease, and how he watched the land with an almost reverent knowledge. She found herself drawn to him not just by circumstance, but by a growing admiration and curiosity that fluttered in her chest like a timid bird. At first, she questioned her own feelings, the widow who had vowed to focus only on her child and herself. But the warmth of his presence, the quiet courage he displayed in small ways, chipped away at her caution. The town around them remained wary of outsiders, and whispers began to follow her. She could feel the judging eyes when she walked through the streets carrying baskets of food or tending her garden. Some offered polite nods, others averted their gaze, and the stranger's presence added to the tension. He moved among them with quiet dignity, never asserting himself, yet commanding attention, simply by existing in a way that unsettled people who were used to ordinary routines. She often wondered what he thought of them, and whether he had any intention of revealing who he truly was. The connection between them grew stronger in the solitude of the cabin. Their conversations stretched long into the night, stories shared in fragments, laughter that felt forbidden, and tears that found release in the quiet safety of each other's company. She found herself laughing at little jokes and marveling at tales of faraway places he had visited. The vastness of the world reflected in his eyes intrigued her, and the mystery surrounding him became a puzzle she longed to solve. Yet she respected the silence between them, knowing some truths must reveal themselves in time. As her pregnancy progressed, she felt both the fragility of life and the resilience within herself. The tasks of caring for him became exercises in strength and patience. Each day she discovered more about what she could endure, how much love and compassion her heart could hold, and in turn, he began to rely on her in ways that went beyond gratitude, a quiet trust settling between them like a bridge neither wanted to cross too quickly nor destroy by rushing toward clarity. Small incidents hinted at his wealth, the fine leather of a boot peeking from beneath his worn trousers, a glimpse of a gold watch chain catching the firelight, a horse in the distance that responded to his voice with uncanny obedience. She noticed these things but chose to focus on the man in front of her, the one who had saved her heart from complete despair by being alive. She began to imagine a future where they could build a life together, free from the shadows of their pasts. Yet she remained grounded, knowing that reality might demand difficult choices, and that the secrets he carried could change everything. She loved the gentle steadiness of his presence, the way he watched over her with quiet vigilance, and the way he seemed to recognize the fear and hope intertwined within her soul. And in that growing intimacy, she began to see not just a stranger or a patient, but a companion, a kindred spirit who might help her navigate the uncertain road ahead. And as the sun dipped behind the Wyoming hills, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples, she felt a fragile but undeniable sense of belonging in their shared solitude and in the promise of what might come if trust and courage continued to guide them. I can move on to part 4, where the revelation and conflict begin to unfold, keeping the same seamless narrative style. The morning light streamed through the cabin, windows casting a warm glow across the room, and she watched him move with a confidence that seemed almost at odds with the vulnerable man she had first found in the wilderness. The truth of who he was lingered at the edges of her mind, a puzzle she had not yet solved. And then one afternoon, as they rode together across the rolling hills on horseback, he spoke of the ranches stretching across Wyoming, naming them casually as if they were no more than a hobby to him. She paused mid-step, feeling a chill run through her spine. The realization hit slowly and then all at once that this stranger who had captured her heart and relied on her care owned not one, but multiple sprawling ranches, vast lands filled with cattle and horses and people, whose lives were intertwined with his. She struggled to reconcile the gentle, wounded man she had nurtured with the powerful figure he had revealed himself to be. Her heart raced with conflicting emotions, awe and fear, wonder and betrayal, as the weight of his wealth and influence settled around them like an invisible shroud. She wanted to ask why he had kept this from her, why he had allowed her to care for him, without knowing the truth, but the words stuck in her throat. She felt unsteady on her horse, as if the ground beneath her had shifted. The stranger sensed her tension, glancing at her with a soft expression that carried apology and hope all at once. He explained that he had chosen secrecy because he wanted her to see him as a man, not as a title or fortune, that he valued her compassion and courage above all else, and yet the revelation brought challenges that neither had anticipated. The townspeople learned of his identity quickly, and whispers turned into stares and judgments, some questioning her motives, others curious about how her life might change now that she was linked to one of the most influential men in the region. She felt exposed and vulnerable, unsure how to navigate the sudden attention while also protecting the fragile life growing inside her. At night, she lay awake beside him, feeling the enormity of the truth pressing down on them, both wondering if their bond could survive the intrusion of wealth and societal expectations. She wrestled with feelings of awe and resentment. The power he wielded a stark contrast. The simplicity of the life she had been carving out for herself. She wanted to trust him fully, but the shadow of uncertainty clung to her. He recognized her fears and reassured her, not through grand declarations, but through quiet acts of patience and understanding, letting her see that his wealth did not define his heart or his intentions. Yet the tension lingered in every glance, in the silence between words and in the unspoken questions of what their future could hold. She began to realize that love and trust would require courage far greater than any hardship she had faced alone, that the path forward would demand choices that balanced heart and mind, and that in order to protect herself and her child, she would need to confront not only the truth about him, but also the truths within herself. As they rode back toward the cabin, with the wind brushing against their faces, she felt a mixture of exhilaration and fear, knowing that the life she had imagined was shifting beneath her, and that the decisions they made in the coming days would determine not only their fates, but the possibility of a new beginning built on honesty, resilience, and the fragile promise of love. The days that followed were filled with quiet reflection and careful decisions. As she began to navigate the new reality of their lives together, the man who had once been a stranger now shared his world with her, a world of vast ranches and responsibilities stretching across Wyoming. Yet he remained gentle and patient, never demanding her surrender to wealth or influence. Instead, he encouraged her to find her own strength and voice. Within this new life, she learned to walk among the ranches with confidence, tending to animals and overseeing workers while never losing sight of the simple routines that grounded her. She discovered that independence and love could coexist, that she could nurture her child while also embracing opportunities that had once seemed impossible. At night, they would sit together beneath the endless sky, talking of hopes and dreams, of fears and regrets, and in those conversations their bond deepened, a shared understanding growing that neither wealth nor tragedy could diminish the connection. Forged through care and compassion, she felt the life inside her move and was reminded of the fragility and wonder of existence, and he watched her with quiet awe, knowing that her courage and resilience were gifts beyond any fortune. The townspeople gradually adjusted to the presence of both of them, some accepting the change with curiosity, others slowly letting go of judgment as they witnessed the authenticity of their connection. She learned to assert herself, not as a widow or a caregiver, but as a partner, a mother and a woman capable of shaping her own destiny. Together, they faced challenges, the demands of the ranches, the scrutiny of neighbors, and the lingering echoes of past grief, yet each obstacle became an opportunity to grow closer to one another, to rely not on titles or wealth, but on trust, respect, and love. She marveled at the way life had led her from loss and despair to this unexpected beginning, a life filled with both responsibility and possibility. She realized that caring for a stranger in the wilderness had not only saved him, but had also saved herself, showing her the depth of her own heart and the strength she carried within. As the sun rose over the rolling hills of Wyoming, casting golden light across the land, she felt a profound sense of peace, a quiet certainty that no matter what storms might come, they would face them together, and that the child she carried would grow up surrounded by love, resilience, and hope. She understood now that beginnings could emerge from tragedy, that courage and compassion could shape destinies, and that love, even in the harshest and most unexpected places, could flourish and endure. As they rode side by side across the open fields, the wind carrying the promise of tomorrow, she knew that their lives were no longer defined by past sorrows, but by the choices they made together, and the new life they were building, a life where loss had transformed into love and uncertainty into hope, and in that knowledge she felt whole and ready to embrace every moment of the future that awaited them.